Hello and welcome to the Mary Grace Show. I'm Mary Grace, the voice of sanity to help you navigate politics, culture, wellness, faith, and world events. And we are here today with our good friend Sam Faddis. Some of you know him as Sam the Spy, and that's because he was a spy. And he has spent years and years as a senior operator in the CIA. We still love him in spite of that because he actually loves our country. He's one of the good ones. Sam also is a veteran of the U.S. military. He has served our country in that way and in many other ways. And he has also been an attorney, and we don't hold that against him because it actually gives us valuable insight into issues of the day. Welcome back, Sam. Great to have you.
It is great to be here as always. And yes, being an attorney is the true skeleton in my closet.
Yeah, we have to bring that in though because we're going to talk about it. So the thing that I think we should well, let's start with some light things. How are the puppies? How are the
Puppies,
dogs?
the puppies are doing awesome. Although I have to admit that last night they alerted about every 90 minutes to, as if people who've watched this before know, I live on a mountain in northern Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So shocker, the woods are filled with woodland animals. The dogs take a personal, they're personally offended by that. And
Yeah.
therefore, about every 90 minutes, they have to charge out of the house to attack something. So good times.
And let's just be clear that one of your dogs is like the size of my cat.
One of my dogs is the size of my
Homer.
cat, but he's actually the most dangerous one. He's the one that actually murders things.
Yeah.
He legitimately. Homer and I have, not to get too graphic, but Homer and I have ended up at 3 o'clock in the morning together in the shower on more than one occasion because Homer is drenched in possum blood from the animal he just
Oh.
murdered, and now. So we're cleaning Homer, which means I'm getting a shower too. So
Nice. 3 o'clock in
times
the
with
morning.
Holmes is always entertaining. Yes.
Awesome. And yeah, we have our cat Billy is the one who brings us all kinds of gifts. We've had live snakes.
Yep.
We had a big squirrel recently, a rat. And with cats, they like to bring them in the house.
You
And
absolutely got to
so
show that they're working for a living. Yes, mine do
yeah,
the same thing. Yes.
yeah, we have to really keep an eye. When Billy comes up to the door, especially if he's got his head down,
Yeah,
we
you got to do a
know.
shakedown. You got to do a full search. It's like you're not
Yeah.
coming through the door, buddy.
Yeah.
Show me your paws. Show me your mouth.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's been very interesting. Thankfully, the snakes have been benign. I mean, I did have to relocate a baby black snake, and I told the snake, I was like, "Look, you better get out of here because he's coming back for you." So we let that one live. It is very interesting though because we're in the suburbs, but we still
Right.
get that kind of
Sure.
thing. But my dad was happy about the squirrel because the squirrels just wreak havoc on the bird feeders, as you know. So let's speaking of murder, w- the Middle East, Syria, that's in the news lately, and you have been one of the few voices of sanity out there that is giving the people the truth about what's actually happening. Um, because it's not as simple as the media is making it out to be. And I think that our listeners probably know by now if the media is rushing to to give you a gushing account of what's happening, and if Lindsey Graham is going on all the talk shows telling you that we need to send aid um, and send our troops in. If Joe Biden is telling you that we're going to send aid, never mind that our American brothers and sisters in North Carolina are still in tents in the winter in the snow. Never mind that because FEMA quote ran out of money and refuses to put trailers in what they're calling a floodplain. Never mind all that.
Right.
But going back to Syria, when you have the lame duck president, such as he is, immediately going to the mic, to tell us that we are pledging all of our support. I hope that everybody who's listening already knows that your spidey senses should be on high alert. So Sam is here to tell us why.
Well, so I used this analogy yesterday talking about this. You know, I guess I do everything with CGI now, but in the old days, in these Japanese monster movies, they used to have like two guys in monster suits, and they were wrestling in basically a cardboard mock-up of Tokyo. So it's Godzilla versus Mothra, or God knows how many of these other ones. And the point is, these two monsters are having a big fight in the middle of town. It doesn't really matter which one of them wins. Everybody in Tokyo loses, right? Because they're all being killed. So if you could grasp that concept, then I think you understand the situation in Syria. Assad, who was the president / dictator for life, fled, and I guess he's in Moscow now, presumably, where he prepositioned millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay, Assad's a bloodthirsty monster, and nobody's going to lose any sleep over Assad leaving. The only bad news is he didn't get killed. Okay, that's cool. That does not automatically mean what replaced him is better. It is possible to have two monsters fighting, and that's what you have here. The guys, I mean, the group here will use their acronym HTS that led the charge and has taken over. It's run by a guy named Jolani. I mean, that's Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. That's his nom de guerre. But anyway, we'll go with that. There's a kind of a complicated series of an evolution of group names and group affiliations. But the point is, Jolani is... This all started with Al-Qaeda, and he was sent to Syria by Al-Qaeda with the express purpose of getting rid of Assad and creating a jihadist wonderland, yet another caliphate. And the group has gone through various stages of evolution. And this guy, who's no dummy, he's a monster, but he's no dummy, now appears on television wearing Western clothes, and he doesn't wear his turban anymore and all this junk. That's all PR. That's all public relations. Nothing has changed, right? This guy's roots go back to Al-Qaeda in Iraq. We locked him up at one point for 5 years because he was killing Americans in Iraq. He went to Syria to set the place on fire and create a jihadi wonderland. His mission has never changed. Along the way, he's been associated with ISIS and our good friend al-Baghdadi that Trump, sent guys to kill. This guy's a very bad man, and in the areas that they have controlled, his group has controlled for some time, it's the usual mad jihadist psychosis. Women are oppressed, people are executed if you speak up, people are imprisoned, people are tortured. So we have replaced the monster who was Assad with a new monster. We have a brand new caliphate is what we have. Now, the other thing, I mean, that's already horrifying enough. So going within 10 miles of these guys and helping them or thinking that you're going to give them money and they're going to moderate, that's nonsense, right? I mean, they'll take your cash, but they're not buying baby formula with it, right?
Who's administering? Who's accounting for the aid that the America is sending?
We still send money into Afghanistan on this nonsensical premise that if we tell the Taliban you have to use this for humanitarian purposes, they will use it for humanitarian purposes. Of course, that's not what the Taliban does with their money. They buy weapons and suicide vests and get ready to set the whole world on fire. So, and yet we do that insanity.
How much of that money? How much of that money? Two questions. How much of that money is getting kicked back to the Raytheon and the politicians who have stock in those industrial military defense companies, and also is the new dictator? What did you say? Was it
Jolani al-Jolani?
Jolani al-Jolani. Is he an asset? of U.S. intelligence.
I doubt that he's an asset, but on the issue of money being siphoned off,
Mhm.
money is going to, in this kind of stuff, money will be siphoned off at every stage. So you're going to sign the US government wants to send aid to Afghanistan, which we actually do, by the way. I didn't make that up. We send millions and millions of dollars to the Taliban every month. So, somebody gets a contract to do that from the US government. And so, there's some sort of contract and some kind of entity, and somebody moves the money and somebody hires staff. And at every single one of those stages, obviously, the potential exists for a bunch of that money to just go into somebody's pocket. So, does that happen? Yeah, of course it happens. It happens at every stage, every percentage. And then it gets in country. And the same thing happens, but probably with even greater abandon. So you can just sort of start calculating, making wild guesses about what percentage. But by the time any money actually gets turned over to anybody in Afghanistan, who knows what percentage? And then when it's all said and done, after all of that's been sucked off the top, you hand it over a bunch of money and it ultimately gets handed to the Taliban. Or in this case, we're talking about handing it to these crazies in Syria. And in effect, you're taking their word for where the money goes. Like you don't have any. What are you going to do? Wander around Afghanistan and try to follow every dollar and where it went? At some point, you simply hand it to a bunch of pirates.
Yeah.
And if you are really under the delusion that any of that money, any significant amount, ever goes for a good purpose, I don't know what to say to you. You're living in dreamland. So the American taxpayers have the money sucked out of their pockets. And then a whole bunch of people on our end get rich. And then a whole bunch of scumbags downrange, terrorists, end up putting the money in their pockets. Right. And look, in some cases, they use it to buy suicide vests and train people to kill us with our money. And in some cases, look, some of these guys that are professing to be holier than thou and are in a big hurry to go to paradise mean it. And some of them are stashing that money in Swiss bank accounts and getting ready for the day when they're going to leave and go off and party. Right? There's a tremendous amount of hypocrisy here. The guys in Hamas, for example, that are based out of Qatar in the Persian Gulf, they show up on camera and talk about the Palestinian people and the cause and how devout they are and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then they take off that regalia and go into the next hotel suite and party with the Russian hookers and drain cases of champagne with the money. So in addition to the guys who really do want to blow themselves up, then you got all the guys who are totally hypocritical about all of this. But one way or the other, we get screwed as Americans because the money is being taken out of your pocket. It's being diverted to a whole bunch of bad purposes. Yeah. It's an insane proposition to think you're going to hand money to a bunch of jihadists who all want to kill you and obliterate you and take their word for where the money went. That's insane.
And you know what really, it doesn't shock me anymore, but where are the voices in the media, in the press, asking those questions of Joe Biden or Anthony Blinken when they say we're sending this money? I mean, we just sent $1 billion to Angola to rebuild after, not unironically, they tell us to rebuild after a natural disaster. Again, North Carolina, people living in tents. And no one is asking, no one in the media is asking about the money, the custodianship of the money. Is there anyone with any sense of fiduciary responsibility?
No.
It's people like us. I mean, we know what's happening, but the lack of curiosity from the media is appalling. And I mean, let's face it, Joe Biden right now is spending money like a drunken sailor on a 3-day leave. And he's doing it as much as he can to set Trump up for an even greater deficit, and for even more of what the media can use as ammunition against him. So I'm not convinced that this regime change isn't being run or instigated by our own government. Um, can you speak to that? I mean, we know that's what they do. We don't know exactly always who's pulling the levers of this, but it seems to me the timing is awfully convenient that we are less than 40 days from Trump taking office, and we have all of the usual suspects chomping at the bit to send our troops in to another endless war.
Right. Well, look, let me state this up front. At this stage in history, there's hardly anything that's beyond the pale, if you will. In other words,
Yeah.
I've been the last guy to say, no, that's impossible. Because at this point, we've been lied to about so many things, and so many things that seemed fantastic,
Yeah.
we now know to be true.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be, honest enough to say I can't tell you that that's impossible. Do I think that is what has happened, that we did this? No. But I mean, in the sense that we orchestrated this like we orchestrated a coup. I do think what you are saying is we have a catastrophically bad foreign policy and the worst administration in American history. A combination of arrogance and deliberate bad acts stirred together with grotesque incompetence and kind of a witch's brew. And what we have done across the globe is create massive instability. And we are seeing that, we're kind of seeing like the late 1930s, the run up to World War III, where you just have a massing of crises, and this administration shows no sign of slackening off. In fact, as you noted, they're just pouring jet fuel on fires everywhere. I mean, they want to give another $1 billion to Ukraine before they leave office. But as an example of what I mean by a witch's brew or a confluence of events.
Sure.
The Turks are supporting these jihadists in Syria. They have provided aid, they have provided assistance, and their intelligence personnel are on the ground. Now, the Turks are theoretically allies of ours, and they're members of NATO.
Yes.
So why are they climbed in bed with a bunch of jihadists? Well, it has to do with Turkey, and it has to do with the Kurds, because one of the large groups in Syria is Kurdish. The Kurds are a distinctive ethnic group. I don't want to get lost in ancient history here, but you have a modern nation of Turkey, and about 40% of the people there are actually Kurds. There is an insurgency going on inside Turkey that has, and the Turks, I have been in the middle of that, and it's bloody and it's brutal and nasty, and it ain't going away. I mean, the Kurds are not about to take over Turkey, but the Turks are not winning in the sense of ending this.
Okay.
You have a large group of Kurds across the border in theoretically what's Syria that are functionally independent of the Turks, which means you have on the Turkish border a whole bunch of Kurds living independently, which are sort of in the view of the Turks, aiding this insurgency inside Turkey, helping them, making it more difficult for them to get rid of it. Okay, this is all like inside baseball stuff as far as Americans are concerned, but for the Turks, it's a really big deal. And they want this little Kurdish enclave that's effectively an independent state to go away. So what they're doing is they are using these monsters, these jihadists, to take over Syria, and they already, starting yesterday, I think, were formally calling on the jihadists to now turn their attention to the Kurds. So they don't care about burning Syria to the ground, and they don't care about the fact that they just climbed in bed with monsters. What they're doing is solving their own little, from our perspective, own little problem, but for them it's existential with the Kurds. And that what they're encouraging now is genocide and mass murder. All of this has happened, plus all the other factors, because we, the Americans, are just sort of pouring jet fuel on fires, encouraging instability. We don't have any idea what we're doing. When we do know what we're doing the wrong thing from our perspective. None of that is suggestive that we should send troops in or like we should
Right.
be occupying Syria. It's just we have effectively set the world on fire with our policies. I mean, part of the reason Syria
Yeah.
fell is because the Russians didn't support Assad anymore. Why don't the Russians support Assad anymore? Because they're bleeding to death in the Ukrainian war. They don't have any resources. What I'm saying is there are ripple effects from everything
Okay.
we do.
Right.
And we are not what should be the principle. The principle should be what's good for the United States of America. Well, war
Right.
is not good for the United States of
Yeah.
America, setting the
Except
world
for
on
a
fire.
select few. A select few.
Well, I mean, precisely. When I say good for America, I mean the
Yeah.
American people, not Raytheon's
Right.
stock price. That we're not doing that. I mean, look, you mentioned Ukraine. I'd just say for the record, I think you know this. 100% what the Biden administration wants to do is blow up the Ukrainian conflict and make it to make it impossible for Trump to
get us out.
to resolve us and get it
Right.
out. They want it to
Right.
the fire to be burning so hot and things to be escalating out of control and
Mhm.
make it so he no longer physically can extricate us.
Okay.
Now think about
Okay.
that. They are deliberately trying to make sure this conflict cannot be resolved and the killing goes on.
And this is just a level of evil that's hard to comprehend.
Yes.
But seeing what we've seen over the last however many years, like you said, nothing surprises me anymore. And I want to ask, are you in touch with uh sources like on the ground or close to Syria? Do you have an idea of what's happening with the Christians in Syria? Because, prior to this, the Christians were relatively safe. But I'm seeing reports now that they're being targeted. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the answer to your first question is yes. I've been talking to folks there in the region and on the ground.
Okay.
What is happening with the Christians right now is a great deal of uncertainty. In other words, they aren't yet being massacred or rounded up, but nobody is under any illusions that means that that's not going to happen. What do I think is going to happen? You are going to see very, very rapidly the creation of a complete jihadist Islamic state run according to the most strict interpretation of Sharia law. So are Christians going to be okay? No, 100% not. You're not the only way to be secure in that environment is to be a Sunni Muslim as opposed to a Shia, and to adhere to this crazy 6th century interpretation of the Quran that jihadists appeared. So if you're a Christian, are you going to be safe? No. A Jew? No. If you're a Shia Muslim, are you going to be safe? No. If you're a relatively secular Sunni Muslim who just doesn't believe in this barbaric 6th century crazy, you're actually probably going to get killed first.
Is that the case with the Kurds? Because they're a lot of them are Sunni Muslim, but because they're Kurds, does that just erase the fact that they're Sunni Muslims?
Well, see, you could, if you're a Sunni but you don't adhere to the wacko jihadist interpretation of Islam, you're actually the worst of all, because you're somebody who's gone against his own faith. You're a traitor against the faith. So you die first, and you die in a horrible fashion. So in my experience, the Kurds are Sunni Muslims, virtually all of them. Some are Yazidis, and they are relatively secular. I mean, when I was in Kurdistan, you got Christian churches. You got Christian churches with neon crosses on the front, like you might see downtown in an American city. Nobody was bothering those churches. Nobody was intimidating them. I mean, in fact, obviously, by the
Yeah.
fact that they've got a neon cross, and I'm not kidding, on the front of the church, they're not hiding. And they were safe and they were secure because they were operating in an environment of religious tolerance. What
Hmm.
you got in Syria now ain't that. I
Yeah.
mean, you are
Yeah.
not going to church. You are not maintaining that faith. You're going to die. Plus all the other lovely things that we have come to associate with this. So if you're a female of the wrong persuasion, you're going to be a sex slave. You are literally going to be captured and trafficked and used. And every ugly thing that we associate with the caliphate and Al Qaeda
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
Taliban. I mean, look, the Taliban recently passed a rule that women are not allowed to speak in public. Not only do they have to move around in their burqas and can only
Yeah.
go someplace with a male escort, but if they can hear your voice in public, you will be beaten.
Hmm.
Right? That's what's coming in Syria.
And I want to, speaking of the burqa, I want to make it clear that, in the US, we see a lot of Muslims who are wearing the hijab, the headscarf. That's not what Sam is talking about. He's
No.
talking about being covered from head to toe. Even your face is covered and it's all black. These heavy, it's like wearing draperies over your whole
Yep.
body. And the only opening is a little black screen for the eyes. That's what he's talking about. And I've seen that. I've been in Indonesia and seen that, and in parts of Turkey, but when I was in Turkey, it was relatively, I mean, I was in Istanbul, so
Mhm.
it's relatively modern. So this is, going back to like the dark ages, for these people. And the Christians, do you think there's a chance, that Turkey will accept Christians who are fleeing Syria if they manage to get out? Will they give them safe harbor or not?
Do I think there's a chance? Yeah. I mean, look, first of all, there's a wide variety of opinion in Turkey, and the fact that Erdogan, their president, now thinks he's the new sultan of the new Ottoman Empire and has gone on these mad ventures doesn't mean everybody in Turkey adheres to that. I don't want anybody to draw that interpretation. I also think that there are a lot of implications here that the Turks haven't thought out about what's going to happen. I think they are so blinded, they being the people that ordered this, by the prospect of
Mhm.
eliminating the Kurds on their border and that laser issue, that all the ripple effects for them, they're kind of ignoring. So, yeah, they're going to be people fleeing into Turkey. Theoretically, that's one of the things the Turks are trying to stop, but creating jihadist crazy land on your border is not ultimately going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Turks can be very cold-blooded in terms of
Yeah.
a very narrow focus on interest. I mean,
Okay.
when the caliphate was rocking and roaring, the ISIS caliphate in Syria, the Turks were routinely allowing
Mhm.
people to cross their territory to go to fight there. Um,
Interesting. Yeah. Well, they command such a strategic position, in the world, being literally having command of the Bosphorus, and the gateway to Russia, to the Black Sea, right? And also the crossroads between Europe and Asia. It's a unique world. I mean, geographically, and they certainly have taken advantage of it throughout history. So, like, what's to stop them now, right? I mean,
yeah,
you know,
and look, the Turks. I mean, the Turks are not Arabs, right?
right?
They're originally from Central Asia. Historically, the term in Turkish to refer to Arabs, the phrase they use translates to former slave races. There's an element
Interesting.
there of people that still want to restore the Ottoman Empire and go back to the days when the Turks ruled a big chunk of the Middle East, right? Again, as
Hmm.
outsiders that originally came from Central Asia. It became a very secular nation after the First World War, which is when it went from being the Ottoman Empire to Turkey. and their ruler Ataturk set them on a very Western course. Where they are now with Erdogan as president is really a revival more of this Ottoman tradition, and along with it, Islam. And Erdogan talks in terms of restoring the Ottoman Empire. So
interesting.
You got a big change in their direction and their tone.
Very interesting. It's now my wheels are turning now because I'm thinking of, you know, little bits of history that I've read, and having been in Turkey, now I'm wanting to go back and do some more research. I think Peter Fleming, when he was a travel writer back in the 30s, I think he was traveling incognito through that region, and also through China, Manchuria, as he called it. So I don't know if anybody's interested in that kind of thing, but I would go back and find some of his books. But it's fascinating. But the point, going back to this, is that it's not our circus, not our monkeys, and yet this administration is working very hard to make it that. And I can only surmise that the intention is to, like you said, embroil the U.S. So tightly into that region, as well as to continue the entanglements in Ukraine, so that Trump is immediately on defense the day that he takes office. And I do want to talk about him taking office. I know that you can give us some insights on that. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back. For those of you who are just getting here, I have with me Sam Faddis. As you can tell, he has quite a bit to say about the Middle East, having spent years and years there as an operator on the ground, and his insight here is invaluable. So we will be back. I want to make sure that everybody understands that here at Mary Grace Media, on the Mary Grace Show, we depend on you shopping with our America First partners. And the best way that you can do that is to go to my website, marygracemedia.com, and click on the QR code here, or you can just go to the website. And when you get there, go to the shopping links, and you will find all of the companies that we partner with. We're going to highlight a couple here, and then we will be back. Also, make sure when you go to my website, get on the mailing list so you won't miss shows like this, because we're bringing you the truth. We're telling you what's actually happening, and what real history is. This is not revisionist Marxist spin history to get you into an emotional tailspin. This is where we bring you the truth so that you can make informed decisions about policy, about voting, about what it is that you're going to do as an American citizen and a citizen of the world. So we will be right back. And please make a point as you're going into the holidays, buy from our America First companies, support these companies, protect American companies, protect American farmland. And also I'm going to highlight one of our healthcare providers, because I don't know about you, but a lot of people find themselves getting sick this time of year, and there's ways that you can prevent that. And if you can partner with a medical provider that actually helps you stay healthy, then you could alleviate that. So we'll be right back, and don't go away. Keep your volume up. We'll see you in just a couple minutes.
Hello, I'm Jordan, and this is my brother. And I'm Nace, and we're at the Grid Down Chowdown. And this is Larry, who is a local rancher that we've partnered with. Now, Larry, you've been ranching for over 4 generations, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm 3rd generation, my son's 4th generation, and I've got some grandkids that are 5th generation.
Man, that's awesome.
We've been here for quite a while, yeah.
All right, now, Larry, your cattle is grass-fed, grass-finished, and pasture-raised, just like God intended them to be.
Yes, because I want to know what's in that animal.
Right.
What it's been fed. And so the only way to do that is for us to keep it all natural, just like God has done it for years and years and years, thousands of years.
How has partnering up with us helped you and your ranch?
Well, it's allowed us to develop a market that we didn't have before, one that can get directly to the consumer, and that's great.
And just remember, more importantly, with every package that you buy, we put a salvation track in there. So from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for allowing us to do what we believe that God has us here to do. And just remember, God loves you. He really does.
Amen.
Go to griddownchowdown.com and use promo code. Americans spend more now than ever on healthcare, and we're sicker than almost anybody in the world. We've put our trust in a system that's completely let us down. Dr. Troy Sproul and the team at Synapse Center for Health and Healing have changed all that. They are a functional medicine clinic, and they get to the root cause of what's made you sick in the first place. Once they do that, they give you solutions to help you get out of that. This is the way that medicine was meant to be practiced, and this is what they're doing. They're changing the entire system from the inside out, one person at a time, and you could be one of those people. And so when you're working with the team at Synapse, they're giving you solutions and not just prescriptions. That's a game changer for me. When you set up a free discovery call with Synapse, you're starting on a journey of healing. You're starting on a journey of getting answers. And that's why I've partnered with them, because I want you to be healthy. I want your family to be healthy. I want you to have all of the resources that you need to steward the body and the health that God's given you. Go to officialsynapse.com and tell them Mary Grace sent you. That's Official Synapse, SYNAPSE.com.
I'm excited to announce our Christmas extravaganza is finally here. Get this season's flannel sheets for as low as $59.98. They won't last long, so get them while you can. Our famous My Slippers, they haven't been on sale for over a year. Regularly $119.98, now only $59.98. Our 6-piece towel sets are back in stock with extremely limited quantities, only $29.98. With hundreds of MyPillow products, there's something for everyone on your Christmas list. Bathrobes, duvets, quilts, down comforters, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save on all MyPillow products. For example, flannel sheets for as low as $59.98, or our 6-piece towel sets, just $29.98. But that's not all. I'm extending our 60-day money-back guarantee until March 1st of 2025. Plus, all orders over $75 or more ship absolutely.
And we're back. So, as I said, Mary Grace, the Mary Grace Show here. I have Sam Faddis with me, and I'm going to leave this link up here for just a minute. Please click the link. Any of the sponsors that you saw there in our commercial, you can go directly to my website and click directly onto those sponsors. Just make sure you let them know that Mary Grace sent you. And when you go to mypillow.com, use promo code Mary Grace. And there's still time to order, still time to get those presents wherever you want them to go, and wrapped and under the tree. Okay, so Sam Faddis is our guest here today, and we are talking about we've been talking about what's going on in Syria. I want to switch gears here because we are just weeks away from the inauguration for the 47th president, Donald J. Trump. In the interim, however, we have to get through another January 6th. And that is the time where we are going to have to pray that all of the electoral votes get certified. And I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds on this for people who don't quite understand what happened the last January 6th. That was so consequential, but it had to do with certifying the votes. And it's pretty clear that somebody didn't want any of the objections to come up on the House floor. And the timing of the so-called breach was suspiciously right at the moment when the first state representatives stood up to bring objections. That's a whole nother topic. However, we've got to get through January 6th, and then we have to get through January 20th. Where are you with this, Sam? And what are you thinking? And what are you hearing from your sources about the likelihood and the likelihood of success here?
Well, I think the likelihood of success is high. I expect the president to be inaugurated and us to move ahead. But I do think that people need to be very sober and very conscious and very aware. Okay? we, being the America First movement, MAGA, whatever you want to call it, are in a really good place, much better than we were prior to President Trump winning. That's all really positive. The war is not over. The people you're opposed to did not suddenly vanish. They didn't all just vaporize and say we lost and we quit. So there are going to be all manner of things that happen. You know, the BLM Antifa troops are still out there and still very active. Look, what was the head of BLM calling just the other day for the gentleman that was just acquitted in New York of
Daniel Penny.
Daniel Penny was, thank God, acquitted, as he should have been.
Yes.
For basically saving the lives of people on a subway car by restraining a guy who ultimately died. For his trouble, he got to be persecuted by the so-called prosecutors. Okay, I'm enthusiastic about that result. I'm fantastic. That's justice was actually done. Immediately thereafter, you got people from BLM saying there should be rioting and targeting, and basically we should go out and targeting white people because somehow Penny saving the lives of people of all colors and ethnicities on a subway car is a sign of white supremacy. Whatever. Those crazies didn't go away is what I'm saying. And the people within the government didn't just suddenly say we lost and we're quitting. So all kinds of madness could ensue. And I would just say to everybody, we're in a good place. Understand, just be calm and sober and cautious. Don't get sucked in anything. Don't rise to the bait if somebody's trying to fire you up. One of the big cards the left is playing now is that we are all, as usual, neo-Nazis and Trump's a tyrant. And when he takes over, there's going to be this incredible abuse of power, which is the ultimate case of the pot calling the kettle black after what we've suffered through floods. Trump's going to abuse the justice system. The point is, that's the card they're playing. Don't do anything to feed into that. Don't, anytime we need to be very sober. I was having this conversation with Steve Bannon the other day, and I don't mean to suggest that he was resisting it. We were agreeing. There are people that are going to need to go to jail. There are people that are going to need to lose their jobs for what has happened.
Yeah.
We have to do it in a way where we can stand up to scrutiny and be sober and not be perceived to be being as bad as the people we are fighting against.
Right. Rule of law has to prevail, right?
Absolutely.
And it's, it's interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday with Bishop Leon Benjamin. He's a pastor here in Virginia and also in Oklahoma. and he's on the transition team. And he was saying something that I thought was really good. It was a little bit of a nuance because the rhetoric is that Trump is going to prosecute his political enemies, that he's going to go after them in much the way that Biden did. And Leon said, Trump is going to let the people that he hired do the jobs that he hired them to do. In other words, if you have an impartial AG, if you have an impartial, nonpartisan attorney general and a FBI director, then you can actually apply rule of law. And I think there's something interesting. People are saying that Kash Patel is a Trump loyalist. Well, of course he is, because you don't want to bring people who hate you into your administration. Every administration brings in loyalists. That's not the issue. The issue is, can that individual separate the emotion from the actual law? And I believe that Kash Patel can, because he's been on both sides of the fight. He has been a public defender. He has been a prosecutor. He's actually been also in the system as a defendant. And so I think that when it comes to the question of what Trump is going to do, Trump is going to try very hard to stay out of it and let the people whose job it is to look at the law, interpret the law, gather evidence and bring cases based on that to bear. What do you think about that? Is that a good
Yeah,
assessment as an attorney?
yeah, look, I agree with you 100%. I agree with you about Trump. I agree with you about cash. And I think this is exactly the tone that needs to be set. Okay, here's individual X and the possibility of abuse of power and abuse of office, and it broke all these laws. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it by the numbers. We're going to investigate. We are going to proceed according to the law and be impartial. And if the facts are there that establish that this individual committed crimes, then we're going to take the necessary action and we will pursue that. And if the facts are not there and the evidence is not there, and it doesn't matter that he's a political opponent of the president. We're not prosecuting people based on their political affiliation. If you were a FBI official and you abused the law, abused your authority, broke U.S. law, and took actions that are completely unjustified against American citizens, then you will pay a price.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have the evidence to support that, and you hate Donald Trump down to every fiber of your being, we're not prosecuting you because you are a political opponent. We are returning to the rule of law and objectivity. And I keep harping on this, and not because I'm trying to convince you, but because I understand there are a lot of people who are angry, really angry about what happened over the last few years, as am I. But we got to make sure we don't let that anger carry us across into doing something that basically now we're copying the enemy, if you will. And I use enemy in quotes because I don't really like to use that term for any American. But the point is, we cannot become them in fighting them.
Right.
And I've always felt that way in a lot of context. I conducted interrogations in the field of Al Qaeda guys at the height of enhanced interrogation. My direction to everybody who worked for me was, we will not use those techniques. We do not become the enemy. We do not torture the enemy, no matter how reprehensible they are. That was sometimes controversial, but I believe in that principle. We cannot become what we are fighting. That's really, really important. And on a crass, tactical, political level, all you're going to do if you start going down the road to advocating for that is help the other side, because that's the picture they're trying to paint of us.
Right.
And anything.
And of course, yeah.
Well, even a post. I'm talking to people that are watching this. You're maybe not going to be involved in the prosecution, but the point is, you are involved in what you're tweeting, what you're posting, and what you're saying. Anything that sounds like we're going to get them, revenge. It is not just, again, on a crass political level. It ain't helping the cause, people. All it does is give somebody something to repost.
Right. Yeah. And it's a confirmation bias for sure.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. What do you think Trump is going to focus on? What do you think, or if you had to pick his top 3 based on what you know and what you know of him and what you've been picking up, what do you think he's going to do right out of the gate?
Immigration. He's going to close the border and turn back on all of the mechanisms to deport people from this country. 2, end the war in Ukraine and stop that whole madness, because the ripple effects from the war in Ukraine are all over the planet. I mean, Vladimir Putin is openly threatening to stage nuclear attacks on European capitals. We legitimately are teetering on the edge of World War III and the apocalypse. Got to shut that down. 3 would be the economy. And that amounts to, at the heart of that, I think, is changing our relationship with communist China, which is long overdue, which is not like you can't flip a switch and say we're disconnecting from communist China, because we've climbed into bed with them for 30 or 40 years. But you can sure as heck take, on a macro level, put in place policies that bring manufacturing back to the United States and steer us away from our dependency on the Chinese,
Mhm.
where we make
Mhm.
things here. And even when we make them abroad, we do not make them in a communist totalitarian
Right.
slave labor camp.
Mhm.
We stop handing money to the people who want to destroy us.
Or take us over, right? Yeah.
Look, yeah, and just for the record, I'm not talking about the Chinese people writ large. They're the ones who wake up every day in what amounts to a giant slave labor camp. I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party.
Mhm.
Chinese, an evil, thuggish, totalitarian entity. And yes,
Right.
they want to take us over. They want to run the world. And right now, our economic policy is designed to make them rich and give them the money they can use to do that, which is
Yeah.
national suicide.
Yeah.
And I think Trump understands that, and he is going. We're a super tanker. It isn't a speedboat. We're not turning 180 degrees on a dime.
Right. Yeah.
But to begin the long process of
Mhm.
changing that fundamentally.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and I think I I tend to agree with you on that. And in terms of the economy, I was listening to Vivek Ramaswamy on Tucker Carlson. He
Mhm.
recently did an interview with him. I recommend that everybody listen to that. It was fascinating. And if you don't subscribe to Tucker, it is up on Spotify. You can get it on there. And so it was fascinating because he was talking about reducing the employee pool of the US government by 80%.
Mhm.
And one of the things that is very difficult about that is that there is sort of a no fire clause built into these
Mhm.
government jobs. It's you're set for life once you get one of these jobs, whether you come to work or not. I mean, it's very hard to fire them, especially because of the unions. So he was talking about actually he said you can't fire people individually. You'd have lawsuits out the wazoo, right? The racism, sexism, whatever,
Mhm.
targeted. But he said you can eliminate departments, and you can
Mhm.
have reduction in force.
Mhm.
You can have restructuring. You can give people the option
Mhm.
of moving to Iowa and keeping your job in that department or quitting.
Mhm.
And so, he believes that 25% would automatically self-deport from
Mhm.
those jobs when given those options. And then, of course, the rest their jobs would disappear. So I think it's an interesting approach. And I think that, when people are saying that the tariffs will cripple us, well, if we don't have billions of dollars in wages going out to people who aren't actually earning a living, do you think that'll balance it out? Maybe?
Well, look, I agree with all of the suggestions you just laid out, and I saw that as well.
Yeah.
I sort of, as usual, taken all of the above approach. First of all, there are federal agencies
Mhm.
like the CIA. Everybody in CIA technically serves at the pleasure of the president. So that the president, in regard to CIA, can
So
fire
he can just yeah.
everybody. He doesn't have to dance. And then in regard to the rest of them, I mean, there are entire agencies that I think should go away. I don't know why there's a federal Department of Education. Well, I know why there is.
Shouldn't
There's no
be.
good reason. It
Right.
hasn't made any positive impact. Our
Mhm.
educational,
Mhm.
our kids get a worse education now by far than they did before the Department of Education was created. In any event, it's not supposed
Yeah.
to be something the federal government runs, and they have abused the authority, blah, blah, blah. That whole department should go away. If you're a federal employee and you want to apply for a job in another part of the federal government, God bless you. But DOE doesn't exist anymore, Department of
Mhm.
Education.
Mhm.
I agree 100%. Agencies need to be downsized, but also agencies that
Mhm.
continue to exist. Why are they all in Washington, D.C.? The one that is always mentioned is Department of Agriculture. Why isn't
Right.
it out in the heartland of the United States in Kansas City or St. Louis or someplace
Mhm.
where in the heart of the of agricultural America? And then if you
Right.
want to move to take that job, that's one thing. I agree. A lot of people won't move.
Mhm.
But
Right.
also, there's another benefit here, which is maybe instead of being isolated in the imperial city, all shut off by yourselves, maybe
Yeah.
you ought to be out with the American people, the people that you're making all these rules
Yeah.
about. Maybe Department of Agriculture, you ought to be out where the farmers are, not in Bethesda.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, I don't know if people know this, but the USDA actually administers the national forests too, which is weird to me. But, you know, one thing too that I think is going to change bigly is that, and Vivek brought this up, there was a ruling in the Supreme Court earlier this year on something known as the Chevron doctrine.
Mhm.
And I'll try to explain it because I think people need to understand this because this will be the basis upon which a lot of Trump's changes are made. And when I say Trump, I mean the people that he's delegated to do
Sure.
that, including Vivek. But this is important, and I encourage people to go look this up. It had to do with the fact that up until this ruling, the courts were using the Chevron doctrine as the basis upon which to rule to pass their rulings, and that is that the regulatory agencies and their regulations took precedence over law when it came to enforcing things like right of way, water rights, any kind of EPA regulations. So all of these regulatory agencies have basically written their own laws, completely void of any input from Congress, and that's unconstitutional.
Mhm.
And so if you think about people who have been prevented from putting up a building or putting a road onto their own farm or onto their own business, Trump talked about this a lot, how
Mhm.
much the regulations cripple advancement and development. Those regulations have largely been unconstitutional, and the Supreme
Right.
Court ruled on that. And I do encourage, again, go back and listen to that interview with Vivek because he explained it really succinctly. So, but the point though is that in not only has that protection been done away with, it will actually pave the way. The ruling on the Chevron doctrine will make it easier to eradicate and dismantle these agencies. I think I got that right. I think that's what we're going to see happen. And for the people who think, you know, maybe some of you do work government jobs. And I know that it's not easy to think about being, you know, the subject of a reduction in force, but it's just that's life. And I think that if you are in a position, if you have a skill where you are bringing value, then why wouldn't you be able to transfer that value to the private sector? That's my question. If what you're doing is so important and so valuable as a government employee, then you shouldn't be worried because it should transfer into the private sector. Now, if you're just punching the clock and collecting a paycheck, then we don't want you on the payroll. You can figure out a way to make money and provide for yourself and your family, but not on our dime. We're over it. Tough
Yeah,
love.
look, I mean, the size of the federal government is out of control, and the scope of its authority is out of control. And Chevron doctrine. I mean, basically, a legislature passes a bill, and it says, whatever it says, and then the regulatory agency that administers it was always supposed to have the authority to issue regulations to implement it. In other words, the legislature doesn't have to write 150 pages of instructions. It says we're going to do the following, and then you guys
Mhm.
implement it. Okay, as it's just as common sense, not to get lost in legalese. Everybody kind of understands that, but assumes that, okay, but those regulations are going to be relatively minor. It's just
Right.
here's the form and here's the deadline for submitting the form kind of stuff. Okay, well, we crossed that line decades and decades and decades ago. Now what we have are these agencies,
Mhm.
and they claim all I'm doing is implementing a bill that was passed 30 years ago, but they put in place regulations that are by any common sense definition, brand new laws.
Extra
Congress,
legal, I guess, is
Congress,
what I don't know if that's the
Congress
word.
passed the Clean Water Act in 1970 or whatever it was, and 50 years later, the EPA is issuing, basically promulgating a brand new law all on its own without Congress didn't do anything.
Okay.
Claiming that all they're doing is implementing a 50-year-old bill, but it's like, come on, man, it's not what you're doing. You are passing a piece of legislation, as you said, in a completely unconstitutional fashion. Because, by the way, you guys, bureaucracies don't even exist in the Constitution. And the only people that have the authority to pass a bill are the Congress of the United States.
Right.
And they haven't done anything on this for 50 years. So if that frustrates you, then go to Congress and get them to pass a new bill if you can. But you guys don't magically have the authority to make law. And as you noted, it's exactly what they've been doing.
Yeah.
That ship sailed a long time ago.
Yeah.
We have an unaccountable fourth branch of government that legislates. We don't even talk to the Congress anymore. And what the Supreme Court's saying is, no, you can't do that. That's actually, you cannot just assume the powers of the legislature.
Right.
Also, look, in my opinion, this is not an indictment of every federal employee. That's not where I'm going. But the government is way too large, way too intrusive, way too expensive, and often completely unaccountable. I mean, this issue of people not showing up for work. Again, I'm not saying that's every federal employee. But I know, for instance, as just a vignette from talking to a guy in the intelligence community, they sent everybody home after COVID to work from home. Now, keep in mind that most of the people in the intelligence community work on classified information, and you don't have a classified connection on your personal computer. Somebody home from the Defense Intelligence Agency to work from home who works with classified. What that means is I'm telling them, go home and don't do any work, and I'm going to keep paying you. So that's the first thing to understand. They can't do their job.
Right.
And when they began to try to bring people back slowly, which is still very much a work in progress, they realized they didn't even really know where their people were anymore because nobody was in contact with them and they weren't doing any work. So as an example, one lady, it turned out, who was supposedly working at DIA headquarters right there in DC, Bowling Air Force Base, had gone to Florida like 18 months before and been living on the beach in Florida on her government paycheck for 18 months. The only reason they determined that is because every 2 weeks she had to turn in her time card. And because she was technically still working with classified information, even though she wasn't doing any work, the only place she could do that is to go into what they call a SCIF, which is a secure space where you can access government computer and get onto her time card had to be submitted in a classified channel. So she had to go to some place where there was a computer that could access the classified system. So she, once every 2 weeks, she would go to, I think it was a military base near her beach house in Florida, go into the SCIF, get on the system for 5 minutes, turn in her fictitious time card, and then leave and go back to working on her tan. Because again, she had been told to go home. Nobody kept track of these people.
Yeah.
And because all of her work was classified and she couldn't work on classified from home, no one was tasking her to do anything. So that's into this.
Yeah.
This lady's been being paid, who knows, she's probably making 120 grand a year.
Yeah.
And she's getting paid like clockwork.
Plus benefits.
Racking up retirement time, all of this stuff for literally an 18-month vacation at your expense. I was going to say at government expense.
Yeah. Yeah.
At your expense.
That's, I mean, yeah. And this is exactly what we're done with. And I mean, and I know that she, if she were just an isolated incident, then people could go, that's unfortunate. No, absolutely not. I mean, we live near the Ground Intelligence Center here in Virginia. And, I know a couple of people who were in that position where, they were sent home, but it was it was a shorter time. I mean,
Right.
they lived locally, and as far as I know, they didn't leave the area. But it was, so I was aware that they couldn't actually work from home.
Right.
And so, this is concerning. It's deeply concerning that you have people doing this. And I do want to say too that I think some of this was happening even before COVID, that people were
Absolutely.
working, gaming the system.
Absolutely.
I know for sure that they were, and that there's jobs that are being, they're paying 3 or 4 people to do a job that can be done part-time by one person. I do know that. So there's a lot of waste. But one thing that COVID did was to bring awareness to people who were paying attention to the regulatory state, which was, for example, when people would tell you that it was a law to wear a mask. Well, no, it wasn't,
Right.
because no, there's not a single legislature in any state that convened and passed a law that you had to do that. The same thing with the closures, the business closures, and the Department of Health mandates. These were mandates, and so people like me, stuck our neck out and
Right.
said things like, "Not a law, never passed." But the lack of understanding, the lack of awareness, the lack of education by the public was on full display, because people would just look at you like they had no idea what you were talking about when you said, "I don't have to do what you're trying to enforce me to
Right.
do. And in fact, your employer should be ashamed of themselves for making you play this role of enforcer for a mandate that was never signed into law. They put you in a position of bullying the customers, to do something that never ever was legal." And it
Yep.
and it makes me think about the state constitutions, because I believe that if Chevron doctrine was reversed at the Supreme Court level, I wonder how many state agencies, and regulations are going against the individual state constitutions. That is something that I think should be investigated by people who want to take that ball and run with it. Because if you're having problems, even at the local level, if you're having problems getting permitted for things, or if your state has turned into this regulatory nightmare, it's likely that those agencies are doing exactly what was being done in the case of the Chevron doctrine, which was reversed at the Supreme Court level. It's just what's rolling around in my head these
No,
days.
yeah, look, I think you're dead on. Look, in Pennsylvania, right where I am, and you've spent a significant amount of time
Yeah,
helping us. Okay, during the height of
you guys are awesome.
the COVID lockdowns, they started sending out letters signed by the Secretary of Health, ordering businesses to close and ordering businesses to do all kinds of crazy crap. And at the bottom of this letter, they would cite 2 statutes that they said gave 2 laws that they said gave them the authority. Okay, one was from 1920 and the new one was from the 1950s. One had to do with quarantining people who had been diagnosed as having tuberculosis. And the other one had to do with restricting the activities of people who'd been
Right.
diagnosed as having syphilis.
And they were using that to enforce.
Neither one of them had anything to do with COVID or
Yeah.
any kind of disease similar to COVID.
Hmm.
And neither one of them had anything to do with restricting the activities of healthy people. They both had to do with quarantining people
Right.
who had been diagnosed by a medical professional as having these communicable
Mhm.
diseases.
Yeah.
So why would they do that? Because neither one of those statutes actually gave them the authority. Because they send it out on letterhead from a big agency. They threaten that the attorney general will take
Yep.
action. And they cite 2 statutes that seem official.
Yep.
And it's a mom and pop pizza place. And they can't afford a high-priced lawyer. And they don't want to fight the state. So they knuckle under. Now, every single time those orders were challenged, which I think in the end was like 50 times across the state. Every single time somebody actually went to court and challenged it with a lawyer, they won and the state lost.
Yep.
So the state was never actually successful in winning a
Yeah.
single court case. And after a while, if you challenged them, they would wait until a few days before the court date and then they would rescind the order and walk away rather than lose again. But they kept issuing the orders
Yep.
even after they had lost over and over, and the courts all across the Commonwealth had said, you don't have the legal authority to do this. Why?
Mhm.
Because it was a straight up intimidation tactic.
Yep.
Yeah, we know we don't have the authority and it's illegal, but we're betting the vast majority of people won't call our bluff, and they
Yep.
will do what we tell them to do.
And they were collecting huge fines. You know, one of
Yes.
somebody that
Yes.
I know here was targeted by the health department, and they came up with a long list of so-called infractions, one of which was that they didn't have sufficient hand sanitizer in the break room for the staff. I kid you not.
Yep.
And the fine for that infraction was, I think each infraction was like $17,000. I mean, it was insane, you know, for a small business that's trying to make payroll after being told they have to shut down, to be told that they have 6 or 7 infractions at that rate. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
they're
crazy.
crippling you. There's a
Yeah.
lady just west of me about an hour who decided to fight this, and I spent a significant amount of time talking to at the height of all this. She's running basically a beauty salon, and she's essentially a sole proprietor.
Yeah.
And that's her bread and butter, and that's how she's feeding herself and her family.
Yeah.
They're promulgating regulations, again, based on nothing, based on a bill about quarantining people with syphilis in
TB.
1920.
Yeah.
And amongst the rules they're making up are that she has to squeegee and clean the front window of her beauty salon on the hour with a specific, cleaning solution, and all of this other nonsense. This is coming out of thin air.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
in this case, I would submit to you, not even done in good faith. It's designed
Yeah.
to make it so onerous
Intimidate.
that you knuckle under.
Yeah.
So the legislature didn't vote on that, and the governor didn't issue. Well, I mean, the governor told the bureaucracy to do it, but the point is, the bureaucracy, based on no authority whatsoever, is deciding who gets to keep their businesses open, whose livelihoods they're going to destroy. You're running an Italian restaurant; it's been in the family for 75 years. That's how you keep the lights on.
Yep.
They just cut your throat and killed you and cut off your only source of income.
Yeah.
With a letter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, like I remember my friend, the health department lady came in, and the crazy thing is the lady was sitting there. She was morbidly obese from the health department. And this is a medical practice.
Yep.
And she sat there and took 2 full days of interviewing staff. I mean, it just took over the business. And my friend finally put her foot down. She said, "You have to go." And she said, and then they were trying to make her put up those plastic partitions and all of that. And my friend, she finally just said, "No, I'm not doing that. That's where I draw the line. I'm not putting plastic in the break room between every chair, and I'm 100% not putting it up at my front desk. I'm not going to do that." And it was the whole thing. I mean, it was like, as everybody knows, we're 4 years out, and I know places where they just took down the plastic.
Yep.
Just this year, and you're like, something's different. But we went down a little rabbit trail, but I think it's valuable, because I think that
it's valuable because this is the impact. Look, why
Yeah.
do we live in a country where we have to tolerate this? You're some little petty dictator who's just abrogated to yourself authority you don't have, and you're here issuing edicts. No.
Yep.
Nobody gave you the authority to do that. Go away.
Exactly. And people need to understand that. That's the point, I think, of this little diversion that you and I just had, is that going forward, if you didn't get that the first time, it's essential that you understand how things work, and that these people have no authority to pass down these edicts, much less send their goons in to enforce them. And I do hope that in this new administration, one of the things that happens is that the people who stood by and said, "I'm just doing my job," all of those agents who stormed into the homes of grandmothers with their stormtrooper outfits and, so-called assault weapons at 6 o'clock in the morning and frog march them through the neighborhood in their pajamas, those people need to be held accountable. And, according to the law, because what they did is reprehensible, and
Yeah.
we can't have that happen again in this country. I feel very strongly about that.
Agreed.
Forgiveness is important, but the forgiveness is for us. Forgiveness is for me, for my conscience. It's not for the person that you're forgiving. Yes, you're releasing them from that hold, but that doesn't mean that people do not have to be held to the consequences of their actions. That's essential
Agreed.
for people to understand. So don't get emotionally manipulated by people who tell you that we should just move on and forgive and forget.
Right.
That can't happen, because these people will not let up. They will do it again, and they'll do it to you. So I think that's it. Sam, how can people follow you? How can they find your amazing work?
Best place to find us is at And Magazine, so andmagazine.substack.com, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Getter and Truth Social and all of that, but And Magazine will take you there. andmagazine.substack.com.
It's right up in the chat. Thank you again, Sam Vadas, for being here. Spy Talk with Sam, always enlightening, and one of the best shows online, in my opinion. And we will come back and share with you again soon. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Please share this. Please follow the channel. Please go and subscribe to my email list and support our America First partners over at marygracemedia.com. We really do appreciate it. Every time you do that, it helps an American company. And we will see you back here. I will definitely be back Saturday morning, if not sooner. We have our live Q&A with Dr. Troy Sproul, and that is always a good show. Get your questions ready. Don't wait till the last minute. That's going to be Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, live Q&A, Ask the Doctor with Dr. Troy. We will see you back here soon. Everybody have a great week, and just keep praying for our president. Pray for me, pray for Sam and his family. Being on the front lines is what we're called to do. It's not always easy. So we appreciate your prayers. Have a great day, everybody.